Hey, Pez fans. On my trip to Little Rock, Arkansas in September of 2022, I was there primarily to ride the Big Dam Bridge 100 Cyclosportif, which was a great ride, and I've got another video for that coming up shortly. But the most moving and interesting experience I had was a visit to the Little Rock Central High School, which was really a pivotal point and place in time in 1957, where the famous Little Rock Nine, who were 9 black high school students who were trying to get into this all-white school under the reform laws of desegregation at the time, were actually blocked by the governor of the state, who brought in the National Guard to prevent them from entering the school under the false notion that he was protecting the students. As you can imagine, a lot of unrest ensued. There were riots, and once the kids finally made it into the school after several weeks of trying, they endured what ended up being years of bullying and psychological torture that were kept inside those walls. So the tour that we went on was really, really interesting and extremely moving. And I think if you ever get to Little Rock, you have got to go on this tour. But unbeknownst to us, and as a great surprise, a little bit after we went on the tour, we were also invited to a press conference, which was featuring 5 members of the original Little Rock Nine. So they were in town because this was the 65th anniversary of the day they tried to get into school and start continuing their education in this new high school. So we got to sit in on a press conference and listen to them talk about how things have evolved and not evolved in the last 65 years since they were there. So I recorded the full press conference on my GoPro. The sound quality isn't really great, but I've tried to fix it up as best I can. I think the most important thing here is just to hear what they had to say about how things have evolved or not changed that much in the last 65 years. And anyway, it's worth watching, I think. So let me know what you think down below.
On behalf of the City of Little Rock, it is indeed a pleasure for City Manager Bruce Moore and I to be here as the entire City of Little Rock, not only commemorate but acknowledge and celebrate the life and the legacy of the Little Rock Nine. As we all know, the youth of the Civil Rights Movement. Where many of us today, we would not be here and have the life that we have without the courage that they've experienced. And so on behalf of the City of Little Rock, we're just grateful for the 65th anniversary. Please come out to all of the events that have been scheduled with the City of Little Rock and the National Park Service as we continue this celebration, this commemoration, and acknowledgement of civil rights history. We're so grateful for them. We'll now open the floor with the Little Rock Nine. Please ask any questions.
I'm just wondering, my name is Beth Hines. I'm with KATV, the ABC affiliate here in Little Rock. I'm just wondering what it's like for you all to be back together 65 years later.
Well, you know, because Gloria lives across the world and Minniejean lives in Canada, it's wonderful to be able to do this, and that 8 of us are still around, even though 3 are not here now. They will be with us virtually later, some of them will. So it's a chance for us to revisit our childhood sometimes. But other than that, it's just a pure delight to be reunited with them.
Yeah, I would add that it allows us to be 15, 16, 17 again, which is quite an achievement. So I applaud the City of Little Rock and the mayor and the manager and all the people that helped put this together, that we could get together again, on the road again.
Well, I really like the idea that we can bring our children and grandchildren, because that story, in order to keep the story alive, will fall on them. And so we have to have them with us and to get to know and watch us be silly, which is really funny, as told to me. You guys get really silly when you're together. All my kids. So it becomes their responsibility to continue the legacy, and it is a permanent story that has to keep resonating, specifically for young people. And as I said before, I'm this composite between the wise old woman and the beautiful young person. So when I'm interacting with young people, I call attention to that possibility that I can be your grandmother or I can be your friend. And so we love this. Yeah.
Oh, we're so grateful to be alive and to be alive and together. And to have been invited back. It makes it all come together. So we really feel empowered so that we go back to our respective lives and our communities where we do what we do there. And we renewed our permanent bond with each other.
Okay. Ditto.
Well, we were talking together at breakfast about how important this story is in other parts of the world, maybe even more important in other parts of the world than it is in the United States. And so we've traveled. We get letters. I mean, the last set of questions I got was from Finland. And I was in a session for the Gutsy presentation, never mind. But anyway, I said, go ahead, burn all the books you want because kids come to me. They come to me every day from around the world. And you get all these emails and letters and requests for information. So our children are at the forefront of the learning about this story. They find it beautiful because it is what James Welling says history is more beautiful and more terrible than we know. And there are components of the story that are absolutely beautiful, as well as the other parts. But in the part that kids like is the beautiful part. So go ahead, burn your books, because we'll as long as we're alive, they're coming to us for the story.
Oh, we recognize I haven't started actually burning books in Arkansas yet, but your neighboring states are well on the way.
Yeah. And I'm sorry about that.
I recognize the change in Little Rock. I've lived here continuously throughout the 70s and the 80s up to now. And I used to go to Central High School in the auditorium to speak to children from Northern California and some parts of the Midwest who were on the Civil Rights tour. But I noticed over the years that the Central High School knew very little about their school's history. That began to change about 5 years ago, so I'm no longer distressed about that. And very soon I will be able to speak to many students at the school who are students there for the first time in 65 years.
Well, I want to add that I had a birthday yesterday. I turned
90.
almost 90. Was 80 there. But again, the story of 9 teenagers believing they could change the world, and we look around, and we did have an impact on changing the world. And as I was getting off to the airplane, I thought about the street being named after us. I'm not sure what the street can do, but I think it's a heck of a recognition that as kids we thought we could change the world, and we stuck with that idea that we could change it and have impact far beyond the boundaries of Little Rock. And it's a story that we appreciate you helping us tell the story. But it's the main thing that we learned as young people ourselves, that you don't give up, and you have the ability to make a change in another direction. I remember when the '54 decision was handed down, and the Arkansas Gazette Democrat said that the Supreme Court decision was going to change the South. And I thought in my head, the South needed to be changed. And we're still working on it. We're not there yet, but appreciate being able to be a part of this group, and we're still standing.
Barely.
With pains.
With pain.
But social justice is a life sentence that I've accepted and certainly enjoy and feel energized by it. And I've advised my kids to put rhinestones on my walker or my wheelchair so that I go in looking good and feeling confident. But I can say that at 81, I've had the absolute amazing life of energy and possibility. Everything I wanted did not happen. So I'm going to pass away before I see the beloved community. But what I do feel is that I did the best I could. And we're going to keep doing it. We can't not, we must. We all have a social responsibility to make the world better for everyone. So it's exciting.
I'm just wondering your overall thoughts on race relations in 2022. How far have we come since 1957? How much more work needs to be done?
99% of it has yet to be done. We haven't really made many strides. That's a function of people who are aware of what's going on, but unwilling to confront the issues. In my estimate, there may be other reasons why people are not actively involved in fighting for social justice. It's beyond my understanding. It seems inexplicable, but there it is.
And I say we all suffer from what I call profound intentional ignorance. And as long as we stay in that state, I can't see that we would progress. So this is a call to absolute better education for everyone, and stop when I say profound intentional ignorance, I mean a lot of it was intended for us, and we have to break out of allowing other people telling us what we can learn, what we must know, and how we can be. So there's a Holocaust victim, Bonhoeffer, and the quote is in part, "To speak is to act. Not to speak is to act." And then Elie Wiesel talks about the silent witnesses, the people who stand by and say nothing. So that continues to be our challenge, to speak up. Not to speak is to act, and to speak is to act. So that's where I go. We're where we are because we chose to be silent.
But we have a challenge now too. We have a myriad number of ways, new technologies, new ways of looking at things, new knowledge about how we as human beings function. We know a lot about ourselves now as human beings. And we're in a better position than ever to get rid of some of the ignorance, to replace it with true knowledge. And so it's a challenge to do. we're old. You're young and you've got it all ahead of you to take advantage of what we already know. We know where the faults are. We know what the truth is. We feel it in our hearts. And to bring us all together too, so that we can together celebrate our common humanity. So that's our challenge and your challenge. So I on the one hand, I'm very sad to see where we are in 2022. It seems like we've taken a number of steps, if not backwards, to the side. But I think we're in a better place than ever to really go forward and make some real, genuine changes where we come closer to let's say, loving each other. You know that on an individual basis, we usually can get along with each other. So let's give ourselves a better chance, use what we have available to us with all of our modern technologies and things, and do that. So I hand the ball back to you. And I thank you for bringing it to the public attention, because it takes us all. We all have to want to get involved. We all have to want to, as there's a quote, the Holocaust. I like to quote Raoul Wallenberg, who said, each of us can make a difference. We just have to decide that we want to do it. It doesn't have to be a big one. We each as 9 kids, one individual kid, we chose to go into school, not as a group, but individually. And together it did make a difference. So I think it's time for everybody to step up to the board, do the little bit you can do to help us all attain this wonderful humanity that we are.
So we're looking at John Deering's painting, which belongs to Bruce Moore. I tell young people, you can be an artist, you can be a musician, you can be a poet, and to expand the idea of what social change is about, and it includes all those ways of being and thinking. So everybody doesn't have to go to Central High School and face mob violence and hatred and all that, but we can do things that are useful and that are beautiful and that are meaningful. And so, again, that's the challenge. We continue to be doing what we're interested in. I mean, I'm a convicted tree hugger and sit-inner and all those things. And so we I'm looking at the young climate activists who I admire, and I think, oh my goodness, this is how people felt about us when we see Greta and when we see Leah and when we see those young people. So they give me hope. But if we think civil rights, anti-racism, climate change, environmental activism, they're all about the same thing in some basic way. So draw your way out of it, paint your way out of it, sing your way out of it, and do what you know and what you like to do.
Hi, Lisa Hamilton. I'm with KRK News and Fox 16. I was just wondering, what type of change would you like to see, or are you currently fighting for now?
Total and complete change. And I've been fighting for it since December 3rd, 1941. So I'm pretty upset that it hasn't happened.
Julian with KRK Fox 16. What issues that currently are today's youth addressing that has been concerns to you? Might have been similarities from the past that you're seeing repeat itself.
You're asking what are young people doing today?
What issues that they're facing today, what concerns that you have with them that they're dealing with today that might be similar to what you face?
Well, I think in essence, in general, they're the same issues, maybe different names, but the issues haven't changed. The issues haven't changed. They're fighting the same battle. You look at it historically, it makes sense when you read the record. The historical record is very clear on that these issues have been with us since the country's inception. They continue to plague us. So young people today are not coming into something that's new and different. It's the same.
do you feel that some of the decisions that they're making are what they consider as the easiest decisions, and rather than what's the most difficult one?
Well, I hesitate to make that determination because I don't know, but I think whatever they're doing is done in reaction to the reality they're born into. They're not creating it. It was here when they came. It was here when we came. It was here when you came. It's been here. Okay, I can't stress that point enough, which makes it all the more poignant that it remains the same. Why is that? That's the answer I'm seeking.
And the implication that the children are in charge, the children are not in charge. They emulate the primary value of the society. And if you want to talk about violence, there are two values in the U.S. One is segregation and the other one is violence. So why are we surprised that our children act out what our values are? So if we want them to behave in a different way, we educate them, we give them recreation, we do not take art and music and all those things out of the school. Again, we will have a better society when we have education for people, and that's across cultures, classes, and all that. We can't have these one level and that level. So our children are telling us who we are. So that's what we have to pay attention, because they're telling us who we are as a society.
Yeah, and I think they're not afraid of the future, our children. One of the things about becoming an adult, you supposedly learn moderation, what can and can't be done. But if you have a fearless attitude about change, you believe you can change it all. So whether it's the climate, whether it's race, whether it's gender, these are all issues that young people today are beginning to tackle. The hope is that adults will be as bold as the children and not be frightened by the future. If you had told me 65 years ago that I'd still be talking about my high school graduation, I'd say you're absolutely crazy. Let's get past that. But the older I get, the more I know that people want to hear about my high school graduation, as opposed to just moving on to the next chapter. But at the bottom of all this is the fact that the 9 of us believed that we could make a difference, and you know what? I think we work towards achieving that.
It's funny. You know what? If there hadn't been opposition, we wouldn't be here. We would have melted into that school of 2,000 white kids and 9 black kids and nothing. There would be nothing historical about it. So keep in mind that sometimes opposition makes something happen that needn't have happened. Because I think we could have managed to deal with it had we not had all that opposition, the mob violence, the government, the power, the court, and all that. So the story exists, not because we wanted to go to the school, but because of the opposition to our going into that school.
Beth Reiber from Lawrence, Kansas, freelance travel writer. Probably in your life there was somebody who influenced you to take the position that you did. Could you just talk about that? Because you aren't typical of what people were doing then.
I consider myself a very, very ordinary person. I was a very shy, submissive teenager. And what I've learned is that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when placed in extraordinary circumstances. So I tell young people, you don't know what you can do until you try. And when it means more to you than just the circumstances of yourself and of your family, you realize that other people are hoping that you would be successful because it will have a big impact on them, then it actually allows you to hold on when you realize it's bigger than yourself.
Can we, everybody, kind of answer that question? Can you answer it, Gloria? You can? Oh, I'm gonna say
Okay, you see
it was my mother,
Oh, okay.
and I think it was your mother too.
Well, yeah,
And
but how is that different?
it's not different, but I mean, it's just,
I would say it was my parents, definitely.
So are we suggesting that if we have better parents, that's how probably will be resolved?
I don't say that the parents were necessarily better, I just say that they raised me in that way. They taught me to make a decision on my own and to stand for my decision and to take responsibility for what I did. And what happened was literally a consequence of that way, because as I've said many times before, I never asked my parents for permission to go to Central High School. I was in junior high school when the opportunity arrived, and a piece of paper was passed that I had the opportunity to sign up for Central already then. And I did so without consulting my parents, because I thought it was the right thing for me to do at that time. And but what helped me stay in Central is definitely the courage of my parents to allow me to leave their home and walk into that school each day. I like to say 223 days, my mother and father stood by and allowed me to go back into that. And I think it was seeing what they were able to do together with how they raised me that made it possible. They could have pulled me out at any time. I think if I had been the parent, I probably would have pulled my child out. They allowed me to do it.
Well, I think there's a constant stream that runs through all of us, the 9 of us, that somebody, our bodies, and the family were willing to stand by and think that we weren't off our rocker, that we could be supported, we could make a choice, we could make a difference. And in many ways, each of our names are here because we stand and represent some adult in our family, a mother, father, guardian, who thought it was also the right thing to do. I mean, it wasn't a long line of people supporting Daisy Bates in 1957. Everybody who said that they were standing with us, I think if we counted the reality, there'd be a few people missing. But because we had people who believed in the future and believed that we made the right decisions to transfer, that's why we're standing here talking to you today.
I'm different in that my mother died without ever knowing that we were pummeled every day in school. Because when I would come home, I didn't talk about what happened in school. My mother was extremely protective of her children, overly protective. Had she known, she would have withdrawn me from Central. So I didn't let her know what was happening. My grandfather, however, was different. My grandfather spoke to people with candor, sometimes with subtlety, but he always was very forthright. he was a person who spoke his mind. I remember I spent a lot of time at the store during the year in which all the high schools were closed. And I heard him talking to the bread man, and he asked the bread man where he stood. The man hemmed and hawed and hemmed and hawed. My grandfather finally told him that a person on the fence wasn't worth the gunpowder it would take to blow him up.
Well, okay, I think it's really important that what we say all the time to young people is, and it comes from Elizabeth, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And people want us to claim courage and fortitude and all that. And we really are firm about it being, we're regular kids. And that's key when we're talking to a generation. The word courage brings up all kinds of things. So I try not to use the word because I don't want kids to think that they can't do what we did. And if we represent anything, it is that ordinary people can do extraordinary things.
Two more questions.
Did we scare you?
That must be a very, very learned environment, because I remember that in talking to law school students, they're very reluctant to ask questions. But in talking to junior high students,
Fifth
or
grade,
high school
wow,
students,
they got lots of
they got lots of
I'll ask another one. We've talked a lot about the younger generation here today, and you touched on this some, but how important is it that they know this story to be able to pass it on to future generations? What's the importance in that?
I would expand your group, not just young people, but all of us citizens need to have a much deeper fund of information about past, the historical record. It's a drum I beat a lot. Because I find that people don't know, they're very willing to talk, but they don't know. They speak strange language, really. Made up stuff, fictional. But when you know the truth, that literally sets you free. You're free to act because you're standing on something solid now. You know the facts. And you get it best by looking at the record yourself, not having other people tell you what's there, but doing it, do the research, find out the answers. We actually know all the questions that we need to ask when we do that. And if we're bold enough to put those questions forth, our whole society would be shifted, changed, almost overnight. Because citizens, ordinary citizens who now armed with the truth would demand of their elected officials, as an example, that's probably a good example, given the climate today, they would demand much more honesty and integrity by a group of people. Right now, we're saddled with a lot of folk who don't know and who act anyway, more likely than not in self-interest. And we see that played out too, on the national, the local, other stages as they exist.
Yeah, that whole thing about talking about slavery or the civil rights would make some kids feel guilty. Well, imagine living it. Okay, so guilty, you want to feel guilty, that's okay. I lived it, I'm telling it with compassion and truth. And we know a lot of civil rights people, and the only thing they tell young people is about their possibility. Like, we use these stories to help kids grow into themselves. We're not making anybody feel guilty. So anybody who says that our stories make kids feel guilty, I can tell you, based on the thousands of letters that I get, it inspires them and makes them feel that they can make change and that they want to make change. So that may be what the opposers are afraid of, that all our children will feel, you failed us. We don't like it this way. We want to change it. So that may be the fear, why we're saying we don't want to teach about this. It just occurred to me right now. So
No, that's a good thing to occur to you. As you were talking, I was remembering this whole notion of trigger warnings.
Yeah.
kids who take courses in, quote, hard subjects, they call it, they get trigger warnings so that if something is going to be disturbing in class, they get a pass. They don't have to go and hear that lecture. They can come back when there's something more sanguine, something more saccharine. Truth is not always easy to take, but it is a truth. It happened. And you were talking about our addiction in the society to violence, for instance, and segregation. Those are facts. We are violent. You know, the state of Arkansas was admitted to the Union in 1836. Is that your phone? Okay. So he's got an off button. He'll soon find it. At any rate, the state of Arkansas was admitted to the Union in 1836. The following year, 1837, the Speaker of the House of Representatives at that time stabbed and killed a fellow legislator on the floor of the House floor 1 year later. Because there were so many witnesses, of course, a trial, a jury, a verdict. And that verdict, rightful homicide. Had the guy kept his mouth shut, he could still be alive, embracing violence as a way of resolving issues. We have not abandoned that. We still do that. We kill people, you know, put them in electric chairs. We do all kinds of murderous stuff. So where are we? Well, we need to know all of this stuff in order to figure out where we are. And if we don't know where we are, we can't possibly figure out where we're going to go. Imagination comes to mind. We have to imagine the future as we think it could be. And that's only possible when we know what we've had. So we have one more question.
One more question.
Uno más. Beautiful. I don't know where this other question is. By the way, this is the last question. It has, by definition, to be absolutely profound.
I have one question
Okay.
for you all. My children have the honor of meeting you. You have become part of their world. So for my 9th grader, for my 6th grader, what would each of your call to action for them to be to pick up your mantle and carry it forward?
I would say not to pick up our mantle, but to figure out what mantle they want to carry. And how can they know that? Build a fund of information. Soak themselves in knowledge and information. Ask questions. Ask direct and hard questions of people around them. Don't accept feeble answers. Demand honest answers. Kids can do that. It's tricky. You know, I ask students where I go to give talks to write down a list of those hard questions and take them home for family dinner. And they do. And I hear about it. The kids are excited. The parents are, ooh, not so happy. And that's okay, because life is not supposed to be pain-free. Pain is a part of the human existence. We have to figure out how to deal with it. You know, we, as parents, and I've never embraced this philosophy, a lot of parents want to shield their kids, keep them safe, coddle them, until what? What they're doing is preparing a bunch of people who aren't ready for life. You have to be willing to accept what life has to offer you. And it's never a guarantee, never, ever. That's what I would say to your kids. Or any kid.
So I've gone to a couple of schools for like 15 years for the 5th grade because I found out the fifth grade is my magical group. And so this one school in Nashville, I was meeting with the 5th grade and the parents said, we don't know this. So then we had to build a session into the thing for the parents to come and ask questions because the kids were teaching the parents. So we learn from our children, and that's kind of cool. The other thing that you asked, so actually I go into places where there's CEOs and important people, and I say, could you just be in the 5th grade for this 30 minutes? Because there's just at that point, they're not completely brainwashed, and they ask authentic questions, and they want to know things, and they're willing to hear what we have to say. But that's a good question, and yeah, let them teach you, and that activism can be so many things, because all of it really comes down to power over, and we're always should be looking for power with. So that includes environment, that includes everything. It's all related. It's totally related. It's all the same thing, actually, in my opinion. Power over or power with.
Well, Garcia, and talk about the mantle to pick up.
I believe that we can never have true racial reconciliation until we honestly acknowledge our painful but shared past.
Well, please join me in welcoming home the Little Rock Nine. Thank you all.